We will go through two examples of homeostatic mechanisms. The first is regulation of body temperature. Most of the stuff you can kind of, well, at least with body temperature, you know the basics, shivering to keep you warm, sweating to cool you down, and there's a few other things. But using the same model that we saw before with the bath temperature regulation. Okay, I never experienced that till I moved to Japan. I need to remind you again, I'm very impressed with Japanese bath technology. If it's really, really hot or really, really cold, and something called negative feedback, of course, we talked about before, that helps to reverse the actual effect. The second example we'll go through is blood glucose levels. That'll be next. Let's go through this. If you have an increase in body temperature, these are the following corrective mechanisms that will play a role. The hypothalamus is going to help to actually detect this. Sweating, hair or feathers lie flat. I don't think you have feathers, but some other kinds of animals do. The hair lying flat basically decreases this layer of air that gets trapped. So if we should actually go the opposite to cold first. But if the hair lies flat, that's going to help to help you lose excessive heat in your body. A decrease in your metabolic rate and various behavior changes. You're not going to do various types of activities that are going to make you hotter. And all of these corrective mechanisms will eventually cause your body temperature to fall. That's called negative feedback, and you return back to your normal body temperature. If you have a decrease in body temperature, these are some of the corrective mechanisms. Sweating should stop. Hair becomes raised. And when your hair becomes raised, as I was referring to before, the hair being raised will trap a layer of air. And that layer of air being trapped actually helps to decrease the amount of heat that's being lost in the body. So air is actually a very good insulator. And so when people are building houses, this is using science to build a house. To make the house more energy efficient, a lot of the windows are double paned, which means there's two layers of glass. And in between that layer of glass is just air that's trapped. You can still see through it, so it still functions as a window, but it also prevents heat from being lost if you're trying to heat up the inside of your house, or transfer of heat from the outside to the inside to keep your house actually cooler. So air is one of the best insulators. Increase in metabolic rate, so shivering, so these tiny fluctuations, these tiny contractions of your muscles, shivering will actually generate some heat. It's using glucose and oxygen actually to generate the ATP, the energy to do that, and then you actually get warm. You'll feel warm as a result. Or for me, it doesn't work very well, but we do other things like put on clothes. Wearing clothes is the same thing. Wearing clothes, it just adds more layers, and those layers are actually trapping more air, and so it minimizes the amount of heat loss from your body to the environment around you. So these are all examples of negative feedback, and that is how the body temperature is actually regulated. So quick practice question. This question could also apply to the properties of water unit, but see what you can remember from here. What property of water makes it a good evaporative coolant? Pause the video. High latent heat of evaporation. It just means it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to actually evaporate water. So those water molecules can actually absorb a lot of energy. And then so when evaporation actually happens, a lot of energy is trapped within those water molecules. Okay, blood glucose control is really interesting. If you know anybody who's diabetic or are diabetic yourselves or exhibit behaviors that might make you type 2 diabetic in the future, watch out for that. Then this is something you should really understand, or you just need to know it for IB. So the pancreas is a very important gland. It plays roles in digestion and also is a member of the endocrine system because of the hormones that it produces. So you need to know that the pancreas has little functional units called islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans right here. Probably named after somebody. Okay? Islets of Langerhans. And in these islets of Langerhans, you have alpha cells and beta cells. Now you have to remember this. So I remember IB, because you guys are all studying IB. IB, so that reminds me that insulin for I is secreted by beta cells. So IB, insulin from beta cells. So insulin is produced by beta cells in the islets of Langerhans. And insulin is a hormone. We'll discuss in a second. The opposite hormone that has the opposite effect of insulin is something called glucagon. And glucagon are secreted by alpha cells. So as long as you remember that insulin is from beta cells, then you can remember that glucagon is from alpha cells. Glucagon is the name of a hormone. You want to be careful. This sounds a lot like glycogen. Glycogen is a polysaccharide. It's a carbohydrate. This is how glucose is stored in the liver. This is the name of a hormone. Hormone, polysaccharide. They are related in a way because glycogen is going to be broken down into glucose when we don't have high enough blood glucose level. If our blood glucose level is too high, well, insulin is actually going to help us lower our blood sugar level by putting extra glucose into the liver and storing it as glycogen. Let's see that in a diagram here. So here's glucose homeostasis. Let's start going down here in the bottom left. If the glucose level is too low, then alpha cells will actually secrete glucagon. And glucagon will help to release glucose, extra glucose that was stored in the liver. And remember, when glucose is stored in the liver, it's stored as glycogen. Glycogen is just a chain of glucose molecules arranged in a special way. Okay. Starch is also a polysaccharide with glucose molecules, but the way that they are actually bound together is different, so be careful about that. Starch is not how we, as animals, store glucose. That's how plants do it. We store it as glycogen. Okay, so pretty simple. If the glucose level is too low in our blood, the alpha cells will produce glucagon, and glucagon will help to increase the amount of glucose that's actually in the blood. Okay, it's a homeostasis negative feedback mechanism. Opposite, if the glucose level is too high, then beta cells will produce insulin. Remember IB? Beta cells will produce insulin, and insulin will help us to lower the blood glucose level by either, one, telling the liver to take up extra glucose and store it as glycogen, or signaling for cells to take up more glucose and use it. Take up the glucose and use it in combination with oxygen in cellular respiration to actually burn it off and turn it into energy or ATP. So diabetic people actually have some kind of malfunction here with the beta cells. The body's actually attacking its own beta cells, and so you can't produce insulin. My grandma is diabetic, and she still gives herself daily injections, or actually my uncle helps to give her daily injections of insulin to help her regulate her glucose level. For her, it's not a big deal. It's something that she just does, and she does it to keep herself healthy and to stay alive. Okay, so homeostasis is very important because all of these factors need to be kept at regular, normal functioning levels. Otherwise, things could go really wrong, going blind, and worst possible case, death, and all kinds of things. So diabetes, a little bit about diabetes. Just study this diagram really quick. Type 1 diabetes is usually a genetic type situation here. I mentioned before, autoimmune disease means when your body's immune system attacks your own cells. Not a good thing. So something's wrong with the messaging that's going on, and beta cells are destroyed. If beta cells are destroyed, then you actually are not able to produce insulin properly. Type 2 diabetes is highly lifestyle dependent, and this is big in the news in all the health sections. People eating too much, overeating, taking in way too much glucose, or high fructose diets, which is another type of sugar that we use in lots of foods that we love to eat. So watch out for that. And type 2 diabetes is not really genetic, but it's because you're overloading your body with extra glucose, and so your body doesn't know how to respond properly. So in a normal situation like this, you have target cells, and insulin goes and tells the cells to take up extra glucose by attaching to these protein receptors here. One possible thing that could happen is that your body just says, okay, it seems like it's regular to have this constant glucose level here. So maybe we don't need to produce as much insulin. It's kind of a reactive mechanism. Your body establishes this high glucose, high fructose concentration in your blood as the norm and reduces insulin production because it thinks it's wasting resources. Or your cells can just stop responding to insulin. So if you have all this insulin knocking on the door and there's so many here, eventually it's another mechanism where it's like the receptors are being overused and they become unresponsive to insulin. It's also a mechanism where the body, the cells and receptors are thinking that all this extra glucose is the norm, and so we shouldn't be actually taking up all this extra here. So this is a problem that is starting to plague countries that have issues with overconsumption. So think about that the next time you eat. Okay, quick practice question. Which of the following is transported by the blood? This is related to body temperature regulation. And interesting question here. This could fit in other places as well. Hopefully not the reproductive system. Please tell me that you don't think it's one of these. Pause, try it out. Bing, bing. Okay, the correct answer is heat. Glycogen is not. It's glucose that's transported by the blood. Glycogen is only stored in the liver. Starch is only stored in plants, nothing to do with animals. Heat is definitely transferred, and gametes, like sperm cells and egg cells, hopefully are not transported through blood. All right, thank you. Post any questions that you have.